who will give a little bit of a background on the genealogy portion of the work. And then Nicole will be available to take questions at the end. We also have a whole bunch of family members here. If you see someone with a little pink strip on them, they would prefer not to be on camera, so hope you will adjust your lenses accordingly, but we do have family members who are happy to do interviews at the end because this is a real positive story, and it's really their story about family that had a loss for over 4 decades, and now to have a conclusion to the story of their Uncle Odie, and at least now they know, Odie, and at least they now know where he is. So with that, I'll hand it over to Nicole.
Thanks, Kent. So I'm Nicole Darty. I'm the operations manager at the Snohomish County Medical Examiner's Office. I'm just going to go over a kind of overview of how this case came into our hands and where we got to where we are now. On July 23rd, 1980, a fly fisherman discovered human remains in the Stillaguamish River in Arlington. The death did not appear to be suspicious, and investigators initially thought it may be due to drowning. The following day after being found, Dr. Clayton Haberman performed an autopsy. He determined the decedent did not have any trauma. He also found no evidence of definitive drowning. There was, however, severe coronary artery disease present, which led him to classify the death with an undetermined manner and an apparently natural cause. Dr. Haberman determined the decedent to be a male, about 5'7", approximately 150 pounds, and gray-haired. He did not give an age estimate at that time. After being unable to identify the decedent, he was buried on August 15th, 1980, by Weller Funeral Home at the Arlington Cemetery. In 2008, Snohomish County Sheriff's Office Detective Jim Scharf with the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Team, along with retired Snohomish County Superior Court Judge Ken Kausert, began re-examining old unsolved homicides and unidentified persons cases in the county. The improvement of DNA technologies gave them hope that exhuming unidentified bodies may lead to the collection of a useful DNA profile that could be used to identify the decedents, and they were right. In December 2017, the decedent was exhumed and nicknamed I-5 Stilly Doe. In May 2018, the medical examiner's office entered the decedent into NamUs, and a forensic odontologist, Dr. Gary Bell, performed more postmortem dental charting. The comparisons with known missing persons were compared and unfortunately did not come back with a match. In September 2018, the late Dr. Kathy Taylor, who was the Washington State forensic anthropologist, performed an exam and estimated the decedent to be an adult male, approximately 5'5" to 5'9", and between 45 to 59 years old at the time of death, and that was an estimate. In September 2018, a section of the decedent's femur was sent to UNT in Texas for attempting to obtain a sample of DNA to upload to CODIS. Unfortunately, no matches were found as a result of this upload. From 2018 to 2021, the Snohomish County Medical Examiner Office investigators, mainly Jane Jorgensen, ruled out numerous reported missing persons via circumstances, DNA comparisons, and dental comparisons. In 2021, the Medical Examiner's Office began collaborating with Othram to obtain advanced DNA profiles suitable for genetic genealogy. DNAsolves.com fully funded the laboratory work by Othram in this case. In July 2021, Othram successfully obtained a DNA sample that was suitable after multiple rounds of extraction and human enrichment. The Medical Examiner's Office uploaded this profile to GEDmatch, where a couple of very distant matches were identified in the 5th to 7th cousin range. This allowed Deb Stone with Kin Forensics to begin investigating through genetic genealogy. In May 2022, the Othram DNA profile was uploaded to Family Tree DNA, and low-level matches were once again found, but they were different from the ones found through GEDmatch, which allowed Deb to triangulate the different matches and build additional trees back to a common ancestor. Deb Stone identified a possible set of great-great-great-grandparents to a match who had descendants in the state. Deb then spoke with a relative who mentioned an uncle, Othaniel Philip Ames, who went missing from Arlington in 1980 at the age of 82. This was shocking as the age estimate of the decedent was 45 to 59 years old. However, that was just an estimate. Othaniel either was not reported missing or he was, and his records may have been lost. His granddaughter agreed to DNA testing, and that was the piece that we used to confirm this I-5 Stilly Doe was indeed Othaniel. Othaniel moved to Washington in 1951 with his wife and children. He worked at a paper mill and had a small dairy farm in Arlington. He was also a woodworker and a winemaker. In the early 1960s, Othaniel and his wife separated. After that, Othaniel moved to a small cabin in the woods in Arlington. He was last known alive in the early 1980s after telling family that he would be traveling to California and Oregon. On September 29th, 2022, Dr. J. Matthew Lacey officially identified I-5 Stilly Doe as Othaniel Philip Ames. And we would like to thank, among many others, Deb Stone, Othram, Jed Match and Veragine, Family Tree DNA, and most of all, Othaniel's relatives for helping solve this case. And so I am going to pass it off to David Middleman with Othram Inc.
I appreciate you all having us here. I just wanted to say a few things. First of all, we've been in a long-term partnership with Snohomish County Sheriff's Office and Medical Examiner's Office, looking at a number of cases over the last few years of folks that have not been identified. And it's been an absolute pleasure working with Detective Jim Scharf, Jane Jorgensen, and all the fine folks that have worked hard to figure out who all these unidentified are. I think it's important for everyone to know there are so many more of these unidentified persons, probably tens of thousands to maybe more than 100,000 in the U.S. alone that have never been connected to a name, to a family. And we have technology now that works. We have technology that robustly and routinely can identify these folks. I also wanted to emphasize the point that this case, not all these cases have funding available to them. There's a complex budgetary process and grant process required to secure the funding necessary to do all the work that everyone has to do. And there's a lot of people that do a lot of things. And so again, wanted to share enthusiasm for DNAsolves.com and the community of folks that rally around any number of these cases. And at any given time, we have 10, 20 cases that are in our queue, solvable and ready to go. We're just waiting for funding. So we're always grateful to those that participate. Othram operates a forensic lab that builds DNA profiles. Our profiles are a lot more comprehensive than the typical forensic profiles. Whereas a normal profile consists of about 10 to 20 markers, we're looking at profiles that have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of markers, and they can be used with advanced techniques such as genetic genealogy to help identify distant relatives and bring folks home, as was done in this case. And there's always an element of challenge for the older cases, such as this one, in trying to work with challenging forensic DNA inputs, DNA that's imperfect, that's aged over time and requires lots of iteration. But a lot of the times the complexity is, you can describe the complexity of a case as being in building the profile or as in doing the genealogy. This case was a combination of both. There was some particularly interesting challenges in trying to be able to build a DNA profile from an old case and from evidence that was as challenging as was in this case. But as you heard also, tremendous work on Deb's part to really sort out relationships from what are distant, almost seems too nice, extremely distant relatives to the person that was unidentified. And with that, I'll turn that over to Deb.
Well, it's really great to be here and to be working again with Snohomish County Medical Examiner's Office. We've done a number of cases together. The main thing I wanted to say is to really just give a shout out to the unsung heroes that are the people that upload their commercial test DNA to these sites that allow us to solve these cases. Without them, this genetic genealogy work that we do would really not be possible. And the second people I really want to thank are the people that, when we call, are willing to share their family trees or test for us or upload their DNA so that we can get closer to the unidentified individual. So my condolences to the family. I'm happy he's home with all of you, and I thank you for your assistance in resolving this case.
And you might need to repeat the questions for them if they can.
The question. Oh, I see. Okay. Thank you, Deb and David. Okay, so thank you for everyone for coming, and especially for Othaniel's family. It's very, very great for you guys to be here. At this point, we'll take any questions.
I have a question for David. You mentioned the funding. Can you elaborate a little bit on where if there's a need for funding, where that need is. Is it a county level thing? Is there funding from the state? Is it federal government or locals?
Did you catch that, David?
It's an interesting question. So there are, I think everything begins at the federal level. There is money available, for DNA testing and backlog reduction and other kinds of capacities. There's perhaps people have heard of the Sex Assault Kit Initiative, SAKI funding. It's important that there's funding that's spelled out for the unidentified as well. Right now, there's a national initiative called NAMUS, which catalogs all these cases, including this one, and needs the proper funding to do more than just catalog the cases, but also perform the testing with firms such as Optum to go figure out who these folks are. So there's definitely an element at the federal level. There's also, state level opportunities for, and even at the county level, for folks to look at their budgets and figure out where and how they deploy funding. I think a lot of the times funding is available. I think it's important though, as this technology is new and not always accounted for, to make sure it gets included in a budget or that money is specifically set aside for this technique. There are a lot of ways to process forensic evidence, and this is one of the newer ones. And so I just think advocating is what we do, advocating every time there's a successful identification to include these kind of technologies in the budget when all other methods fail, to advocate that the federal government, track the success of these methods and then continue to fund them appropriately. That's all important. And until we get to that point where this is uniformly supported and funded throughout the U.S., we do the best we can do through advocacy, philanthropy, and even crowdfunding.
And then just a quick follow-up. What are you doing, or what is the industry perhaps doing to, for PR, I guess, to really get the word out to not just the law enforcement agencies around the country and the state, but also the average person who maybe still has privacy concerns about uploading their samples and things like that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Honestly, I think the best validation of the work that we do is, and the work that everyone here did today, is these press conferences, the stories that all of you write. The stories that all of you write are the advocacy, because you're highlighting instances in which someone who is not identified for decades all of a sudden gets identified. And there was important laboratory work and genealogical work, but at the end of the day, budget played a big role in a lot of these cases in getting them off the ground. And so I think every time any one of you write a story on this, it excites folks. And then, there's obviously more to it than that. As Deb noted, there's obviously the generosity of folks that will opt in or help with their profiles to solve the next case. That's great as well. We prefer to highlight the power of what this method can do in solving crimes and identifying the unidentified. And then if people feel comfortable, of course, we're just eternally grateful anytime they share their information. But I think that there's not much more that needs to be done than just to keep spreading the word and showing people this is not an extraordinary event. In fact, it's really almost an ordinary event. It's the consequence of putting some smart folks together, hardworking investigators, and then a little bit of funding to make it all happen. So I would hope this becomes a very routine technique in the next few years. And you can kind of see, just following along in Snohomish County, just over the last couple of years, just the near emptying of the entire backlog of the unidentified. I think it's a wonderful story.
Devin, you speak though. How much are we talking here? What does it take to solve one case, fiscally speaking?
Well, there's a lot of costs and a lot of pieces to this, but the work that Optum does, for example, and this is going to be taking evidence and producing from that a profile. That's going to be something that's in the low thousands of dollars, generally within $5,000. But there's of course additional costs associated with investigators that have to follow up in leads and genealogists that do the research, and so there's costs around that. But the point is, I don't think it's cost prohibitive, and the way I like to think about it is, certainly if you compare the work that we do against other forensic techniques, it's not that expensive. And then I like to consider things from the perspective of dollar per solve, right? So the dollar per solve using our approach is pennies on the dollars to most approaches. You can't draw facial reconstructions of someone for free, and you can't do dental workups and searches for free. Everything we do costs money, and I think that perhaps, especially for the unidentified, the work that we're doing with forensic genetic genealogy may be some of the most cost-effective, dollar per solve work that you can do. And you can imagine what it would cost us to employ a handful of investigators for a month, and probably spend more than the entire budget of one of these cases.
And Just a quick second question. Did this case being 30 years old, did it prove more difficult than, say, like a case that you're trying to solve a month ago, weeks ago? How did that
The age, yeah, the age of a case is challenging. I will tell you, just so you know, at Othram we help identify someone from 1881. So I mean, we've worked with cases that are in excess of a century old. But older cases are trickier, and then it just matters. The circumstances matter. I mean, where the person was found, what condition. I mean, there's so many things that can happen, and then how that evidence was stored over time. So this case was challenging in that it just a lot of the pieces of this case, the age being just one of them, made it very hard to get usable DNA. And that's really the challenge. Is like, can you get enough usable DNA to build that profile? Because if you don't have the profile, then it really blocks you from doing efficient or even sometimes at all any genealogy or further along investigative work.
This this question is for Deb. I know in this it's said that you found a matching set of great grandparents. What is that like for you on a personal level to go back all these years? We're talking about entire ancestors of people and solve this puzzle piece.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
Just what is that like to go back? We're talking about great grandparents here that you were able to kind of identify and solve this mystery. What is that like for you to go back and take a look at people's ancestors and solve this whole puzzle based on a century ago, if not more?
Yeah, I mean, it's very gratifying work, and when you're working with really low matches, the tree can become so large it's quite unwieldy, and so there can be a lot of diagramming and stuff that happens. But to give you an example, this tree had 12,000 people in it that were all related to each other in one another way. And once I was able to identify those great grandparents and have someone upload their DNA, I was able to reduce the number of people I need to look at to about 100 people. So you can see, like, when you're working with such low matches, it's like a haystack. And then when you get better matches or more people upload and we have better matches, it's less time consuming. So yeah, it's very gratifying to get to the answer of the puzzle when it's that large of a puzzle.
I have a question about the autopsy.
Sure.
I'm a member of the extended family. Originally, the family was told that there were no signs of drowning, but you said that there were.
No, I'm sorry. The investigators, when they first discovered the body, initially thought it may be due to drowning. However, during the autopsy, he found no evidence of drowning.
Oh, no evidence?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, and you had originally said that he was last seen alive in the early 1980s, but the body itself was found in 1980, so I'm just trying to...
Yeah, he was last seen early in the year of 1980, and then found in July.
Okay, so then it wouldn't have been too long after he died either, right? Okay.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
And he had probably been exposed to the elements for some months.
Yeah.
Before the impact.
Yeah, I believe so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it was probably later in 1980 that he disappeared because he was at our house, and I know it was either spring or early summer.
Mm-hmm. So sometime probably like June or before.
Yeah, I know the weather was nice.
Yeah.
That's all I remember
Yeah.
about it.
So sometime early-ish, 1980.
How many cases like this have you guys been able to solve?
We've done about, was it 11? Jane? Yeah, I think around 11, because I think we started out, like 15, and we have about 4 left, so I think 11.
4 active ones left that
Mhm.
you're working.
Yeah.
Is Detective Sharp still working on those as well?
I believe so. I think he's in the volunteer kind of position now, but I believe he is still working on them.
It's retired, right?
Yes, correct, yeah.
We have some members of the family that would be willing to speak with us.
Yeah.
Diane Ames, I believe you were willing to chat. You want to hop up here real quick? And also, I have a quick question for the family. The remains were brought here. Are there some family members? Are you willing to sort of have them take some photos and videos with a few of you holding that, just sort of honor him. Would you like to do that now? And then Diane, you can come up and.
Signed over in early 1980,
Oh, really?
like he gave away the Bible.
So do some of the family members want to come up and just sort of take a moment to.
No, you bought a Bible that was given to your.
You're the closest.
What's it like to be holding that right now after all these years and all this time?
I'm sorry,
What's it like to be holding this after all these years?
I'll tell you, it's a very big relief. It's closure for the family. He was my father-in-law, and became estranged from the family sort of over the years. And my children, my son Doug and my daughter Diane, and my other daughter couldn't be here. I hundreds of times over the years. My husband died in 2008. And many times over the years, I just wondered what happened to him. And this has finally brought closure. And my son said this is good for our family.
I'm going to ask you, did you ever think that this day would come? It's been 42 years.
No, I mean, and that's why it bothered me so much, because I wondered over the years whatever happened to him. I hope he didn't suffer. I hope he didn't, it's hard to know. You just don't know what happened.
What do you think of the process, of the way that they were able to make this identification?
Amazing.
Fascinating.
Because my older daughter got DNA done, and it matched. And just by chance, the Ariana's family, I guess, I don't know how she got notified or how they found her phone number from your families. I don't know.
Can you tell us a little
From
bit?
Kay, yeah. And otherwise, if they'd had my son, maybe they would have had him take the DNA, which might have been closer. I don't know. But nobody had our numbers. We had moved over the years, We used to live in Seattle when he disappeared, and moved to Stanwood, and now I'm in Tacoma. But it's like it's come home.
Can you tell us a little bit about what type of person he was, what type of man he was?
Pardon me?
Can you walk us through what type of man Odie was? What type of person was he?
Well, I didn't know him for very many years. My husband and I got married in 1959, and we knew him for about 5 years, and then his wife and him separated and sold the farm, and we kind of lost touch with him. My husband and I were the type that our families just didn't talk about things that were going on, and we really never knew his wife, Lydia, their grandmother. She lived with us for a period of time, and then she had massive stroke and was in a nursing home for about 12 years in Seattle. And they had a lot of tragedies in their lives. When they were living out in Arlington, their next oldest daughter touch, and I don't really know much about.
You said
Yeah, Rihanna's family did know more. I think they'd been to his cabin. Yeah.
you're estranged. You said that you always wondered what happened.
Oh, yes. I mean, I didn't ask a lot of questions, but I think it bothered him.
What would you?
Why? Yeah.
I want
wonder, yeah, where he went, where he spent his final years.
Yeah.
Did it ever occur to you when this person was found in 1980, I wonder if this is Odie?
We did not know, and that's the ironic thing about the whole case, is that I grew up in Savannah. This is where he was found, in Savannah, on the Stillaguamish River. We moved away, got married and moved away. We were in Seattle 24 years when my husband and I, his son retired. We moved back out to Savannah in 1992. We didn't know about finding this body. The person that found it, I know very well. After we moved back to Savannah, I picked blueberries at their farm one summer, and they go to the same church that we attended there for the whole years that we were there.
Discovered.
Birthday party over in Birmingham. I read that article they had. I grabbed myself and I said, oh my God, Spencer, he was a teenager. He's now in his 50s. He has three lovely children that I've known and watched grow up.
So once I found out from my mother, I immediately, I took off work and the next day, and then I went down and I talked with Spencer and his wife.